August 21st, 2024. Welcome to episode 2 of Montreal Hockey Talk. I am Coach K. On today's episode, we're going to discuss why Juraj Slafkovsky is not going to the Olympic qualifiers. Are you surprised, disappointed, pleasantly surprised? We'll find out. Then we'll take a look at what got Patrik Laine into the situation he was in. There's a lot of factors, and they were all uphill for him. So I think some of us have lived through similar situations, and it wouldn't surprise me if you did. Wouldn't surprise me, of course, if you didn't. And it wouldn't surprise me if you were one of those guys that did what they did to Laine. At the end of the day, I think we're all going to be able to relate and understand. And then I put a question out there on TikTok about the Canadiens making the playoffs, and we had some people saying no, but we had a hell of a lot of people saying yes. So I think it's time to talk about line combinations and the possibility of your Montreal Canadiens making the playoffs, because after all, it's time for Montreal Hockey Talk. Welcome back to Montreal Hockey Talk for episode 2 this week, everyone. And of course, as always, I will ask you to click on the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because every time I start talking and this microphone goes on, I want you guys listening, because it's going to be a fun and entertaining season. I have no doubt. Think about it. It's been 3 years or more, actually. No, 3 years since we've been to the playoffs. That's Cinderella run to the Stanley Cup final that I got to enjoy with my 2 daughters and probably didn't think I was ever going to get to that point. Nonetheless, I'm giddy. And it starts with players like Juraj Slafkovsky. Now, we're talking about Slafkovsky for a different reason, and that's because he's not going to the Slovakian Olympic qualifiers in Europe. And now a lot of people are disappointed about it, Slovaks especially. My favorite one-eyebrowed player in the history of the National Hockey League, Miroslav Satan, is pissed off because Slafkovsky's not going. But the Canadiens had to make a decision. Going into training camp, they didn't want Slafkovsky to be hurt or anything of that sort. And he's not, I wouldn't call it hurt, but he's got a sore back. And all of us, especially us of the age where we've got the gray going, we know what it's like to have a sore back. It kind of debilitates you, and you're never comfortable. So the Canadiens want Slafkovsky to nurse that sore back, get treatment, feel good going into training camp, because like I said, it's going to be an 82-game grind, and it's going to be fun the entire way through, because the Canadiens, as I said, I think they're going to be contenders this year for a playoff berth, even possibly, well, if I dream a little bit, a Stanley Cup, but we'll get to that a little bit later. It's unfortunate, though. You want to have your best players at the qualifiers, especially when you're a fringe team like Slovakia. There's so much good talent in Europe these days, whether you're in Slovakia, Slovenia, Czechia, you name it. Even Germany's putting out good teams. Switzerland is always a perennial contender, so you want to have your best out there. And it's unfortunate that Slafkovsky's hurt, but it happens. We've seen it happen to players time and time again for Canada and the U.S. that missed the tournament. Of course, we have a much deeper pool of players to pick from, so it doesn't hurt as much. But there's still players we'd rather see play for our country that don't end up doing it. And it's the same with Slovakia. They want to see Slafkovsky out there. He's been a great representative of their country at the World Juniors, a great representative at the World Championships. They want to see him play against the best in the Olympics. And honestly, so do I. I think the Olympic tournament is one of the best tournaments out there. Best on best is always a great place to develop a player. And to see Slafkovsky not be there for that, I mean, he's going to be there for the tournament. Don't get me wrong. I'm almost sure that the Slovaks are going to qualify, but you want to see him there against other European nations and see how he measures up. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue for Montreal. I don't think it's going to be an issue for the Slovaks. I mean, after all, they've got players like Tomáš Tatar, another former Hab, who's going to be on that roster playing in this qualifier. So, you know what? Chill, guys. At the end of the day, you're going to be there. I'm sure of it, and I'm sure other Slovaks are sure of it as well. Now, let's talk a bit about the newest Canadian, Patrik Laine. Now, Laine, for those of you that don't know, has decided to take on Drouin's number 92. A little bit of irony, given the fact that when Drouin wore number 92, he also went through some mental issues. And the mental issues for Laine started pretty much right off the cuff when he landed in Winnipeg, when he was there with these two clowns, former captain Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele, another ass clown, who we know all too well because of what he did to Jake Evans in the 2021 playoffs, knocking him out of the series with a concussion because Evans was going to store into an empty net and nobody was there to stop him. So Scheifele decides, you know what? Let me make the dirtiest play I can and take this kid's head off. Yeah, well, Scheifele, you know what? Instead of doing that, you might have wanted to stay in the series and not get suspended, because at the end of the day, your team ended up getting eliminated. We lost in 5 in the Stanley Cup final, but at least we got there. And that says something. And it also says something about what they did to Laine. And from Scheifele, I would expect it. He's a little bit of a punk. He's young. You know, he's got a reputation for being a little bit of an ass. Blake Wheeler's an elder statesman in the league, well respected. You would think, being the line mate of Patrik Laine, you would be part of his entourage and you would protect him and you would, take him under your wing and teach him the ropes when it comes to the National Hockey League. That's the furthest thing from what happened. The first year was all sunshine and rainbows, but then, it went off the rails a little bit. And by the time 2020, 2021 rolled around, Laine didn't feel like he wanted to be there anymore. He felt bullied. Things he talked about, And then, of course, he asks for the trade. Winnipeg obliges him, trading him to Columbus. And what happens? His father dies. And so now you're in a new place without any friends, and your best friend has just passed away. And trust me, it didn't happen at the same age. Laine was just 23. I was 42 when my father passed away, but my dad was my best friend as well. And it's very hard, even at my age, to go through that. And, 10 years later, I'm still missing my dad on a daily basis. And I can imagine it's the same for him just 3 years later. But getting back to what we're talking about, he was in an extremely vulnerable mental state. And somebody should have realized that, you know what? Somebody needs to talk to him, pull him aside. Are you okay? Is there anything that we can do? Instead, no. You had a bunch of jackasses from that team go to the coach and the general manager and say, you know what? We don't want Laine here anymore. And here's Aaron Portzline talking about it on a radio show in the States about the guys that did it. Now, granted, the audio is not great here, but we did our best. But take a listen.
Players. I think it was probably after the 1920 season. And if my recollection is right, it was Cam, it was Seth Jones, it was Werenski, it was Foligno for sure, maybe Gus Nyquist. And it was, what do we need? Actually, Foligno may have been traded at that point, but what do we need to do here to make this thing work? You guys know what a good room is like. You've seen it. And the players who they have a hard time doing this sometimes, and you understand why, basically came back with, you got to get Laine and Merzlikins out of here. That's step 1 and 2. And the organization heard that and said, you know what, let's get rid of the people who said that, not the people that they mentioned. And let's do all of that, right? And that's one of those things, like, in the near term you go, well, that's kind of, ouch. Like, you have those guys that bare your soul, and they do, and that's how you respond, by moving them out rather than taking the suggestions they made. But think of the chill that sends throughout the room as, don't ever share your honest opinion here, because that's how it's going to be handled.
There you have it. And I love Aaron Portzline. He's a great reporter. He's a good friend of this show. He's been on a few times during the pregame show. And by and large, he tells it like it is. He doesn't beat around the bush. And, you look at guys among the players on that list, Gus Nyquist, a former Red Wing. You look at Seth Jones, who you would think would be a little bit more understanding, given that he got tossed out of his first destination too. Then you look at who else was there. He talked a little bit about Nick Foligno possibly being there. He couldn't remember whether he was traded or not. I would be surprised if Foligno did anything of that sort, to be honest, because he's not that type of character. And then, you got Zach Werenski, who's the only guy who's still there. Everybody else got tossed out, giving them the message like, hey, don't throw your teammates under the bus. But at the end of the day, it's not something you want to see happen to Laine. You don't want to see it happen to anybody. And so, You get traded, you lose your dad, you have nobody on your new team that wants you there, and you still manage to push through 3 seasons before you say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. You know, Pascal Vincent benches him because his mindset just wasn't there. He wasn't producing. I get it. You know, it's a lot like Ryan Johansson not telling the Flyers that he was injured when he got traded. And now, you know, he gets bought out in what's called a material breach of contract, meaning that he can't perform. It's kind of the same thing. That's where Laine was headed. And I think him saying that, hey, my head's not right, I need to get into the player assistance program, it's the most mature thing he's probably done in his life. So kudos on him for making that decision. Kudos to his fiance, and I don't have her name, so I apologize up front, for being there to support him, because God knows that this kid needed it. And she stayed there every step of the way to make sure he did everything he needed to do to get himself in the right frame of mind. And we saw it on his media availability. He was smiling. He was comfortable. He was talking freely. The next day, he talked about playing Fortnite in French to try to learn the language. I mean, that's vintage Patrik Laine. And that's what we want to see. So good on you, kid. And I hope everything works out for you as you go along. Now, to the big focus, and that is the Habs making the playoffs. Now, I know a lot of you out there are going to say, yeah, coach, you're smoking something you shouldn't be smoking. But you know what? There's a lot of people out there who think the Canadiens should make the playoffs. So let me look at a few comments here. And unfortunately, I can't get them on screen yet. I'm not there, but I will read them out. Alex Walker on TikTok says, team's healthy, Habs make the playoffs. If we deal with injuries like we did in the last couple of years, no chance. And I agree. The Canadiens can't afford to have big major injuries like they did, like losing Kirby Dach 4 periods into a season. That was huge. You know, it threw the balance off. You know, they had set up the power play for all right-handed shots, and now all that went out the window because of the fact that Kirby Dach was no longer there. So you want to stay healthy. Forget about the 300-plus man games lost every year. The Canadiens need to be healthy. They were relatively healthy last year, but they still lost a lot of manpower over the season. They need to stay consistent. They need to stay strong. The medical department has to keep tabs on the players and make sure that they're doing their therapy, they're taking their off days, and they're getting their rest. And at the end of the day, 82 games goes by very quickly. It's not a long season, guys. Think about it. October, November, December, January, February, March. 6 months, 82 games. Once that's done, you're into the playoffs, and the real season begins. So, yeah, stay healthy. And again, Kelly Habman says that as well. It all depends on the injuries. If they don't have any serious ones, they make the playoffs. D says they'll miss the playoffs by 5 or 6 points, but the future's bright. That could also happen. I mean, one of the things that I heard, and it came out of Brian Wild's mouth, because Brian Wild is the wise man of journalists here in Montreal when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens. And be sure to read his Call of the Wild. It is the best read when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens by far. He was on with Tony Marinaro last night, and he just outright said, you know, the Canadiens scored 246 goals last year. This year, they're projected to score at least 275, if not more. 275 was there before Patrik Laine even got to the Canadiens. So if you can score 275, maybe with Laine there, you score 280, 290, whatever the case is. Let's just say 20 extra goals. So now you go from 275 to 295. That's a playoff berth, guys. That's 93 to 95 points. There's no question there in my mind at that point whether or not the Canadiens make the playoffs. How many games did they go into overtime that they couldn't get that extra point because, oh, lo and behold, they couldn't score? We saw it more often than not. Imagine Patrik Laine out there with his big tree trunk legs and his 6'5" frame, 225, skating at full bore coming down on defenseman. I wouldn't want to be standing there. He's going to run you over. 3-on-3, I can't wait to see him out there in overtime. Jack says, as a Habs fan, I personally don't really mind where the Habs land this season. I mean, if we do bad, we get a good draft player, and if we make the playoffs, at least we're close to making it. Yeah. You know what? That's just it, guys. Be positive. And you got user, blah, 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 whatever number it is. Dream on. They're not close. I don't know what you're watching. They are. Andrew Pye, yes, playoff team. And they'll give Toronto fits. I like the way he's thinking. Steph says, in French, pour une équipe, les séries, besoin d'une différence plus de 30 buts, et Montréal est loin de ça. Basically, he says that Canadians need a goal differential of at least plus 30, and they're far from there. I don't believe that anymore. I think they're going to be well beyond plus 30 when it comes to goal differential, especially given the fact that we don't have Jake Allen anymore letting in bananas every second goal. I mean, one of the things that we watched last year was the implosion of Jake Allen. Jake Allen is a good 30 to 40 game goaltender if he plays consistently. But beyond that, I'm sorry. Even with the Montreal Juniors, I wasn't convinced that Jake Allen could have been a bona fide starter in the National Hockey League. He's a 1B at best, and really putting it as a stretch there. So, as we're talking about, and I'd love to get to all your comments, but I don't want to put people to sleep. Here is the forward combinations as projected by Daily Faceoff. Actually, that's not even the forwards. That's the D. Whoops. Here we go. There's your forwards. So now you've got Uri Slafkovsky with Suzuki and Caulfield. Then you have Alex Newhook with Dock at center and Laine on the right wing. That's a solid top six. Then somebody corrected this because the other day they didn't even have Joshua Roy on this list, which really pissed me off. They had the other clown that I'll talk about in a second. You got Joshua Roy with Christian Dvorak and Josh Anderson. Now, there's no way Josh Anderson is scoring 9 goals or wherever it was like it was last year. His season last year was about as snake-bitten as you could possibly get for a player. He was healthy all year, but the puck couldn't go in if he took it and stuck it to the goaltender's ass. It was just that simple. And we don't expect him to have that bad of a season this year, especially given the fact that he's going to have a guy out there like a Joshua Roy feeding him the puck. Dvorak, when he gets the puck in an offensive position, he tends to finish quite a bit as well, which is really, really cool. And then on the fourth line, as you can see here, you got Yoel Armia, Jake Evans, and Brendan Gallagher. Now, you're going to say Brendan Gallagher on the fourth line at whatever it is, $6.5 million is a waste of money. It is what it is now, folks. It's not his fault that his hands were destroyed by Shea Weber, because up until that point, Brendan Gallagher was putting goals in at a 30 per season clip. Then, a couple of seasons of not being able to play because his hands were destroyed. And that'll do that to you. 1 year is tough. 2 years, oh my God, don't expect any type of comeback. And last year, we saw glimpses of Gallagher. We saw glimpses of a shot. This year, I don't expect much, but if he's playing on a fourth line, I could see him contributing 15 goals. Same for Armia. So, there's a difference there that wasn't there before. That goal differential that we talk about, the 30 goals that, Steph talked about, that were missing. If Armia gets 15 and Gallagher gets 15, lo and behold, suddenly you have those goals and your team is in a playoff position. Now, getting back to my little graphic here, we go to the defense. And on the defense, you've got on the first pairing, Mike Matheson and Caden Gooley. That's a no-brainer. Then you've got Lane Hudson with the elder statesman, David Savard. And this is the interesting one, because I know it was said that David Savard, big deal, he's going to leave at the trade deadline, so who cares? He's not in your top 4. I beg to differ. He's always in your top 4. David Savard, despite the fact that he's not very fast, is an extremely positionally sound defenseman. And there's no way you're going to put him aside and say, oh, you know what? You're not going to play because I'm trading you at the deadline. No, you do want to showcase him. And what better way to do that than putting him out there with the phenom Lane Hudson? I mean, it goes without saying. And then on the bottom pairing, we've got Arbor Jacki and Jaden Struble. Now, hear me out. That bottom pairing may not even look close to that if you think about it. Because, look, personally, I don't think Justin Barron's going to be on this team. He's got a 2-way contract. I see him going on waivers. We may lose him, but it's not no sweat off my ass because it's a 2-way contract to the AHL. But when you think about it, David Reinbacher wants to push for a spot on his team. Logan Mailloux is right there, ready to make this team. And then you've got 2 lefties in Struble and Jacki. Jacki's not going to play every game, I don't think anyway. I think he's going to be out there for certain games, not for others. And again, this all depends on injury. But it's going to be interesting to see how they slot in Struble, because Struble, despite the fact that he tailed off at the end of the season last year, he had a very good year. And then you take a look at Reinbacher. He's going to push for a spot. He looked, despite the fact that his season started out like crap in Europe, when he came to Laval, we saw how physical he could be. We saw how well he could contribute. So I'm anxious to see what he brings to camp, what kind of package he brings to camp this year. And then you got Logan Mailloux. Logan Mailloux, who was the stalwart on defense last year for the Laval Rocket. And I think he's going to try to bring that to the Canadiens as well this year, along with a little bit of extra muscle and a real desire to make this hockey club. I mean, don't forget, 2 years ago, this kid was out of hockey. Couldn't play because of what happened to him, right? And what he had done. What happened to him. I take that back. What he had done to that woman in Europe. I mean, you can't say that, it's Masterson worthy. Sure it is. But he hasn't been in the league yet, so it's not Masterson worthy. But anyway, Mailloux, Reinbacher, Struble, Jacky. 4 players battling for 2 spots on your third pairing. Guys, when was the last time that happened for Montreal? That kind of depth. And we're not even going to talk about goaltending, because a lot of people are out there saying, the goaltending's not good enough, the goaltending's not good enough. Let me tell you something about the goaltending last year that you guys don't know, or haven't realized, I should say. Caden Primo played 26 games last year. The majority of the first 2/3 of the season, he spent it on the bench doing nothing, or up in the press box, I should say, doing nothing but watching hockey games, because they couldn't send him to the minors because they would have lost him on waivers. Here's a kid in 26 games, put up a 2.99 goals against and a .310 save percentage on a team that down the stretch fizzled out because of the injuries. You're going to tell me that you're not going to put any confidence into the way this kid plays goal? I do. And being a goaltender myself, I can appreciate what he did, what he went through last year. You want to play every game, every second game as a backup. You don't want to be sitting there, as the third wheel. Like when you go on a date, right? You don't want to be the third wheel. Primo didn't want to be the third wheel, but he had to be. And he was a good soldier for it. He didn't complain. He went through the motions, and he played well given the circumstances. So let's give him a pass, because I think with more games under his belt, he's going to be even better. And then there's Sam Montembeault, who last year didn't see the same quality of defense in front of him that he's going to have to start this season. Not to mention, with Jake Allen not there, he's going to get the brunt of the majority of games. So what's going to happen? A lot more focus, a lot more games, a lot more chances to play better. And by and large, he was a .903 goaltender last year. He impressed the hell out of me. And at the World Championships in the spring, he looked bloody fantastic, leading Canada to a gold medal. So, okay, granted, the defense was different, but was it? You take a look at Montreal defense right now compared to what they had at the World Championships. It's not that far off, guys. It's not a stretch to think that Montembeault can bring you that caliber of goaltending with the defense that he's got. Now, like I said, this defense is going to have to learn to block shots properly and not allow as many through from high danger areas, but they can do it. They've got the talent to do it. And when you possess the puck like this defense core can and this offense can, how often is he going to see that many danger chances, high danger chances? He's not. So are the Canadiens playoff bound? I think they're playoff ready. And yeah, I think they're playoff bound. Now, be sure to go ahead and mention everything in the comments. Call me stupid, call me crazy, call me whatever you want. And of course, you watch this video, do me a favor, go down to the bottom, give me a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because after all, you don't want to miss another episode of this crazy kooky show, which is going to get better as I go along, because I've still got stuff coming in. This studio is not finished. It's going to look even better. Bye for now.